Hey there, welcome to Stronger in the Difficult Places. I'm your host, Dr. Zoe. Today we're going to talk to author Sandy Stream, and we're going to be talking about the courage, just courage to kind of live a truth and dare kind of life. Listen in. Sandy, I'm so glad to have you on today. Thank you for making the time to come talk to us.
Very happy to be here with you, Zoe.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about courage today. And courage, man, first of all, I love the word because I try my best to be brave and courageous in so many of the things that I do in the world, and I try to encourage my clients to do the same. So when I heard that you wrote this book about courage, I was very excited, and so I wanted to dive in. So can you tell me a little bit, just tell my audience a little bit about your story and how you came to really begin to do work on courage?
I think this book, anyways, came about. I've lived a life that, like many others, had a ton of difficulties, and everyone has different difficulties and different things. But the last three were particularly difficult, for so many people. And
Mhm.
I just ended up sitting a lot with myself and with a lot of meditation apps and talks and anything I could get my hands on, and really just try to find my own sanity and my own peace inside.
Mhm.
And so these sanity notes came together and became a book. And I guess it's the pieces of my puzzle of how I managed to live my life now, feeling pretty much well all the time. Like no matter what's going on, I'm able to navigate myself basically. And courage was a big part of it, obviously, because when we're making any change, there's often a lot of fear of what is it going to be like, which is different than now. We don't know what's going to happen. And so there is a bit of a leap that occurs, when you're doing change or when you're doing something new for yourself, usually that you might have not done. So courage is really, for me, an important step of going from, all the lower, I don't want to say lower as if we're comparing emotions, but in terms of the difficult, whether we're going from shame or guilt and anger, and nothing wrong with anger, by the way, but if we're going from there to changing our life, courage is often that necessary component. So, I,
Wonderful.
yeah.
So that was kind of your difficult 3 years was the impetus for you learning to encourage yourself, and then therefore the book came.
Yeah, therefore the book came, and from there came my next step, which is the courage circles. So now I facilitate circles in Montreal, where you might think courage is okay, we have to go like jump from a train or do some drastic thing, but often courage is just to appear. you
Uh-huh.
know, last time somebody came and said that, they have social anxiety and they came to just try to be there and see how they can help them. Though for me, that's huge courage, just to be able to come there and sit around. And we discuss things honestly. So I think that's a very rare thing in our world where people are honest with what they feel, what they're going through, and where there's little tolerance or no tolerance, I would say. Maybe I don't really say it, but I guess people feel it by the way that I describe the listening that we need to do in the room,
Hmm.
that we don't tolerate putting each other down. Basically, we're just listening to each other and seeing what people think, what people feel.
Right.
Um, and so it's a space where it's just fabulous. I mean, it's just amazing. People open up very quickly. People encourage each other. It's just, I wish, it expands into our world.
Courage
So
circles.
that's the
Very
hope.
interesting.
Yeah, it
Very
sounds
interesting.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think about courage, I think about so many things that women, because the majority of my audience is women, that women need to find the courage to do, right? There's sometimes the courage to speak up. There's the courage to be quiet. There's there's the courage to end a relationship, or there's the courage to speak the really scary truths. And
Yeah.
you talk about, and we'll talk about too, is the courage to actually see ourselves and the courage to be honest with ourselves, the courage to work on our own relationship. So, and our relationship with ourselves. So I love that word courage. And I can think of so many applications of that to women's lives. And the courage circles sound amazing. I don't think we can all have courage circles, but I wonder how we can facilitate more courage in our life because I think the majority of the things that we want to do in our life, all the potential that we have inside of us, we tend to be the sabotagers of it, right? It's not always the things that happen in our life or those roadblocks. It's ourself and it's our mindset. And if we can find the courage to somehow break through and get through that mindset, then we're able to have all the good I think that we have potentially, to have in this world. So, can you talk a little bit about how we get from a place of fear to courage?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first thing that happened is to really realize that we need to stop demonizing our emotions. I mean, that's a big part of it. We're really starting to feel ourselves. So
Mhm.
this concept has been demonized for about 5,000 years. I hope we're getting close to the end of that soon.
What
But
concept?
it's
The
the
concept of
concept of,
demonizing.
yeah, demonizing our emotions. I
Yeah,
mean, this is what we feel. So why would that be, by definition, if you think something you feel is wrong, then there must be something wrong with you. Then, something, my body's wrong, I'm wrong, I'm all
right.
messed up, which is completely the opposite of the truth, in my opinion. But so stopping to demonize our emotions and doing the contrary, meaning to listen to what we feel and to trust that, is very, very hard to do because
Absolutely.
nobody, really encourages that. They basically tell you, stop feeling this. You shouldn't feel that. You should do this. You shouldn't do that. Don't just this. And so just to even go there and say, no, I feel sad, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm allowed to feel sad. It makes sense. I feel sad. Maybe I lost a person. Maybe I'm lonely. Maybe whatever. So to say, no, there's nothing wrong with my feeling. It's actually, I better listen to it and see what I need. Or if I'm angry, maybe, I need to put a boundary. Somebody, I'm feeling disrespected or something. So to actually trust our emotions instead of push them aside is already a pretty dramatic move, I think, for many
And
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think when
Mm-hmm.
we look at, okay, so how do we trust our emotions? I think one of the things is that what we tell ourselves. So I hear you saying emotions are not bad. I would go
Yeah.
a step further and say all emotions are good. And
Oh,
that's what I
absolutely.
say to all of my clients. So
Yeah.
when you start to feel something and your self-talk, your taught way of looking at things says, this is bad, let me stop, let me not feel this way, then what you want to say to yourself and remind yourself all of the time, all emotions are good. And so, if all emotions are good, emotions are there for a purpose, right? And
Yeah,
so then it's the
absolutely.
question of what is my emotion trying to tell me?
Yes.
And if you can sit with, okay, my anger tells me something's wrong, ask yourself what's
Mm-hmm.
wrong, right?
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
sadness tells me I've lost something. So you want to ask
Yes.
yourself, what have I lost? You really
Right.
want to start to explore. Your fear tells you I'm in danger. What do I
Mm-hmm.
feel is threatening me? And so if you can then start to reframe the idea of your emotions and be curious about them, then those that's kind of the first step to not demonizing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree with you on that fully. But I mean, it's very hard for people, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they've spent their whole life being put down, basically, in a subtle way or in a direct way. I think it's actually prevalent, just in our regular life by tone of voice, especially. It's not necessarily you're an idiot, but the tone of voice is often like, I'm better than you, or you're so stupid, or you didn't achieve, or whatever. It's a
Can
tone
be,
of
yeah.
voice that we're just
Mhm.
surrounded with. And so people walk around constantly feeling something is wrong with them. And so for sure, the first instinct when anything occurs is like, oh, what did I do wrong? Or what's wrong with me? Or what? And
Right.
so to turn this upside down completely would be to try to start to, whether you do it through meditation or movement or whatever you do, to try to feel yourself internally and, maybe just trust a little bit that there's goodness there, there's goodness
Yeah.
inside, and there's nothing wrong with you, even if you made mistakes, even if you didn't get degrees, even if you didn't have kids, did have kids, have a dog, don't have a dog, no matter what you've done or achieved or not achieved, there's just goodness inside. And so if you start from starting to feel again, not only now your emotions, but starting to feel your own heart space and feel your own heart and knowing, understanding yourself and caring about yourself, that for me is the place to start. Really, everything from this knowing, this deep knowing that we are all deeply just fine inside. There's nothing really to fix in there. It's all fine.
Yeah.
It's a very hard thing to experience when everyone around you is saying the opposite. But in our circle, that's exactly what goes on. That is precisely the energy that's in the room. We really drop our titles. I'm the first to drop it. I actually have a law degree from a very prestigious university. And I start the circles by introducing myself with my law degree. Everyone introduces themselves with all their prestige or non-prestige or dogs and cats.
Right.
And then we drop it. And then I
Yeah.
ask everyone, can we just drop all that for a moment? For this 1 hour, we're together and just talk to each other from a place that's more center, more human.
Hmm.
And it happens very quickly. People just feel great knowing that they're not defined by
Right.
all these things, and it's the truth, and it's a wonderful way to be with each other.
It is. But I'm thinking about the woman at home who doesn't have a courage circle and is
Right?
trying to figure out how can I find that courage to do the thing in my life that I really need to do or know I want to do. And so can we, and in community, often we do when we attempt to be vulnerable, and we get positive feedback from that. There is a lot that we can get from that, but not everybody has community. And
Yeah.
so I'm just trying to think of those steps, right? So you talked about
Yeah.
not
Yep.
demonizing
Yep.
emotions. Another thing you talk about is painful truths, is like being able to talk
Yeah.
to yourself about your painful truths. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, for me at least, when you're trying to find the truth instead of trying to find what's going to feel okay,
Hmm.
that's very relieving. If we look for the truth, okay, it's actually true. My parents didn't really love me unconditionally, or my partner is not so interested, or whatever. We see the truth instead of constantly hiding away from the pain. Then we can process this pain and our body will eventually release it, whether it's through tears or whatever way that your body will do it with
Hmm.
someone or by yourself. And then we could release all that energy and not be stuck in the pain. So it's very hard for people to actually go towards pain instead of away
Yes.
from pain.
Yes.
But the truth is actually what is very relieving, and then we can make decisions from the truth instead of making decisions based on delusion or lies or something that's not even in reality. So the truth
Right.
is what we feel. Our feelings are true. They're actually in reality. The pain is true. Other things are not true. They're kind of inventions in our head.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah,
so
the
those are,
feelings, the
mhm.
feelings are valid. The stories we have behind the feelings are often not not
Yes.
valid or true.
Yes.
But I
Well,
love what you said when you said, um, what were you saying about painful truths? It
yeah,
just
the truth is true. So if we realize, okay, the truth is, I feel really lonely, right? Let's
right.
say we really feel that loneliness, then okay. So that I'm in the truth now. Now I could see, okay, what should I do? Oh,
Mhm.
okay, maybe I need to join something. Maybe I need to get out there. But we're operating from the truth instead of from avoiding the truth. And then you're not really basing your decisions on reality. You're just getting away from reality all the time.
Right.
And another thing that I find is super, was very powerful for me is to start always saying, trying to see, can I get things from myself instead of always trying to get things from outside myself? Because that is a way to live always kind of in a bit of a desperation of what other people do. So, as an example, the simple thing of approval, right? So, people walk around a lot looking for this one likes me, that one doesn't like me, this one approves of me, this one doesn't. It comes from childhood, obviously, for most of
Right.
us. And, are we able to approve ourselves or validate ourselves or love ourselves and not give that decision making and that power to another human being and say, not that I don't like you, Zoe, but I'm not going to say, Zoe, can you decide if I'm a good person or not? Or can you decide if I'm likable, Zoe, and you tell me if you think I'm likable? Or
Hmm.
can you tell me if I deserve good things? Like that would be, that's not a very, doesn't make sense to do that, right? For me to give that to you,
Right.
right? Even if you might make a fine decision or not, I don't know.
Absolutely.
But I'm
Yeah.
absolutely not going to give that to another
Hmm.
human being.
Hmm.
And I'm going to look for that in myself so that I can walk around in the world knowing myself deeply and and feel like, whatever I do is not from that seeking, from that trying to get from somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
some kind of validation or whatever. It doesn't mean we don't share and have love with other people, but it's not, if I don't get it from them, then I am, cannot function in the world. So it's a very difficult step to mature into, but it
Mm-hmm.
helps when someone guides us and just tells us, well, maybe have a look. Maybe you could, look for that. And how does it feel when you do that for yourself? And I think that's probably a lot of the work you seem to be doing, Zoe, if I look
Absolutely.
at your profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about courage, what you're saying is that if we're able to accept our feelings and really maybe just I don't know if the word is love, but something more than acceptance. I can't think of a word right now. But if we're able to accept our feelings and integrate them into who we are instead of pushing them away, if we're able to challenge ourselves about our stories and our what we believe are truths, right? If we're able to look at ourselves and say the painful things like, oh, maybe my behavior distanced myself from my relationship, right? Or I am an alcoholic, or I struggle with,
Yeah.
being on time, or I struggle with respecting other people, or I struggle, if we're real about the realities of who we are, if we're able to look at those painful truths, then we're able to then have courage. It creates courage in ourselves.
Yeah, but one little tweak I would say to that, if
Mhm.
it's okay, or clarification, at least
Please,
from
please
my
do.
point of view,
Yeah.
is, people will often have a hard time, looking at those things that you mentioned if they feel that's who they are. It's not really who they are, to me at least. It's my experience. Like who we are, I try to see it as just, see yourself as some goodness energy inside. You're just a goodness. That's all you
Mm.
are. And then we're doing all kinds of things in our life, mistakes, behaviors, mess up, not, but doing those does not touch this inner person. It's not you. It's not touching the integral part of you. You're just making mistakes or you're not seeing something. And so this helps, the separation between who you are and the behavior really helps, because otherwise, if we are just ranking, which I don't agree with, this whole point system that exists in our world, somehow like we're ranked by what we do and don't do. You're
Right.
an alcoholic, you lose some points. You're this, you gain points. You slept well, whatever you do, you're getting and losing points all the time. Then it's very hard to see those things, because then I'm going to lose some points, right? But if I see myself internally, like, okay, I'm a good human being inside, there's nothing wrong with me inside, but you know what, it's true, I haven't been putting boundaries in this relationship, and maybe I am playing a part in what's going on, but I'm not doing it in a very self-blamey, attacky way of myself and telling myself I'm a horrible person.
Right.
No, I'm a very fine, good person who just didn't learn how to put boundaries, or didn't, have friends when I was young because of this, or whatever happened,
Mhm.
whatever experiences occurred. So the separation of our inner goodness and whatever behaviors we need to notice. And believe me, I'm the first to have noticed millions I was doing myself, like, oh
Yeah.
man, I shouldn't do that. That's not really good for me or for someone else or whatever else. But finding this inner goodness for me is really, opens up the possibility to seeing anything. So you can
Right.
tell me now, though, you know what, Sandy, I really didn't appreciate you did this and that, or that hurt me. I'm like, oh, really? Like, I'm open to hearing anything, because
Yeah.
you cannot touch me inside. It will not attack me personally, because inside I feel like, okay, maybe I made a mistake. I can look at that. Like, no problem. I'm capable of mistakes, obviously.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, that's courage. I believe that that's courage. And as you're talking about that, what comes to mind to me is
mm,
shame. And so
yeah.
I'm writing a book on shame right now. So
Oh,
certainly shame,
nice.
I've got this confirmation
Yes.
bias. I'm seeing shame everywhere. But
Yeah.
shame is where we take our behaviors, or we take things that are done to us, or we take guilt, right? Which says, maybe I did something wrong, or
Mm,
that was done wrong to me. And
yeah.
shame becomes I am wrong, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's about, and part of healing from shame is being able to separate that, is being able
Yeah.
to separate my behavior, even my patterns, from who
Yeah.
I am. And when
Yeah.
you can do that, then like you said, you can walk in courage because you're not taking ownership of that as yourself. You're just
Yeah.
recognizing, okay, I can look at that now a little more objectively. And I can
Yeah.
see maybe that's not a behavior that I want to continue to do. And I can also understand because my belief is that all behavior makes sense in its context. I can understand why I did that, or I can understand how that happened to me, or I can
Oh, yeah.
understand how I came to be in that situation, right? But that's not who I am. And I think that when we can say, yes, that, but that's not who I am, I think we can stand a little stronger, stand a little taller, and have
Yeah.
courage.
Oh, yeah, it's a major turning point. I
Beautiful.
totally agree with you. I mean, I have
Yeah.
one little story I put in the book about a girl that she was wearing a prom dress and she was sitting, it was outdoors. I was going to pick up my daughter, and her mom was, for whatever reason, screaming at her and literally
Mm.
calling her, "You're such an idiot, you're this,"
Oh,
like really, and the girl
yeah.
was sitting there with her head down very low and she was just insulting her nonstop. And I actually made a choice. I went next to her when the mom walked away a bit, and I'm like, "You're not an idiot." I just
Oh,
whispered it.
beautiful.
I
Yeah.
just couldn't stand like witnessing that. It was very hard for me to watch that going on. But if you imagine that kind of story and imagining yourselves like most people, so if you had people in your life, and I think every single person had people in their life who
Someone.
were
Mhm.
saying you are an idiot in one form or another, it could be a put
Absolutely.
down by a teacher, a
Yeah.
colleague, a
Yeah.
parent, a tone of voice, like we're constantly. And so what do you think happens when this girl is older, right? She has these, they're just thoughts. They're not necessarily true,
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
is this thoughts that's been taken inside, because she heard it so many times. You're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. So now she probably walks around with that thought, okay, maybe I'm an idiot, I must be an idiot, maybe I'm an idiot, so
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
are thoughts that
Hmm.
are not necessarily true,
Correct. Right.
right? The truth is in the heart, and the truth is that every single person in their heart is pure goodness. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing to fix. They're just going through things and need to look at what they're going through, help themselves deal with it or whatever, get some help. But that is my deep belief, at least in myself and others now. I didn't have this before, and um,
I'm
so
wrestling with that one as you're talking
yeah,
about it,
tell
that
me,
every single
yeah,
person has pure
yes,
at in their
yeah,
heart is pure goodness. I
yes,
think that applies to most.
yes.
I'm
There might
struggling
be
to
some
decide
rare
if that
exceptions.
applies to all. Yeah. And then the question I think is,
I haven't met any. So I've certainly met many people that have shown narcissistic traits. I've dealt with major, anger management issues with others.
mhm,
I've dealt with emotional distance. I mean, I have dealt with a lot of people, demeanings and dismissiveness and all kinds of things. And to me, so far, but I can't speak for you, my feeling so far is that those people are quite injured, have
absolutely.
not, they have not taken the time or been able to access, the time or awareness to look what's going on with themselves or why these are happening. Um, and so that's where I stand so far. I have not met such a person yet, but perhaps there are some exceptions. But I think for the most part, people are conducting themselves with behaviors that are really unacceptable. So just because I think we're pure goodness inside, that does not mean that I consider behavior acceptable. Actually, I'm
Correct.
extremely strict with my boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so but so what we can do with that is put very strict boundaries, but I'm not convinced, at least, that those people have not experienced whatever they've experienced that led them to those behaviors, and they haven't had the opportunity to, see what's going on or why they do that or what's going on. But it's not for me to necessarily,
Right.
deal with that. I think every person is responsible for themselves. So it's my
100%.
responsibility to take care of myself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely not our place to judge. It's definitely not our place to always fix either. That's for sure. Um, and the reality is that some people choose not to. And that's why I talk about the concept of all behavior makes sense in its context. I
Mm,
think with any situation, whether you're talking about the mass murder or serial killers or torturers or pedophiles or people who do really heinous things in this world, we can all go back and look at their story from infancy to present and understand why they did it.
mm,
Doesn't make it
mhm,
okay. I
mhm,
struggle with the concept of everyone having internal goodness, but that's my thing. And so yeah, for sure. All behavior makes sense in its context. We can always understand why people do really um, heinous things. But let's talk about boundaries before we close. You were mentioning, okay, maybe about it just is an indication that you need some stronger boundaries. Let's talk about how do boundaries and courage go together?
yeah, I mean, boundaries are really the most important thing that I think everyone can learn to do, especially, in many families, this was not taught or
Hmm.
accepted at all or
Hmm.
encouraged. So saying no to anything was not okay as a child, and you probably grew up having very big difficulty saying no. You might feel like a bad person if you say no. That's a big one, which is not true. So for me, boundaries, it took me a long time to really get them well. It's basically, again, we start with feeling our own emotions. That's why it starts there. But then we start to feel everything. We're not just feeling emotions. We're kind of feeling life. We're feeling ourselves. We're
Hmm.
feeling the world. We're feeling what we should do. It goes beyond that eventually. But boundaries often come up when you feel angry. If you feel angry, it means you probably need to set a boundary somewhere, meaning not that
Mm,
you want to control the other person, not like, I'm setting a boundary. You can't talk to me that way, so you stop. And then they do it. You're like, no, I told you it's a boundary. You stop. But that's controlling the other party, right? So that's not a
right.
boundary. Boundary means this is not something that's okay with me. So I will do what I need to
Exactly.
do,
Yes.
in this situation. And
Yes.
that took me forever to really realize that a
Yeah.
boundary is just what is not okay with me
The
at
rule that
this
you have for
moment,
yourself. Yes.
at that moment, and it
Yes.
might change. Maybe next year I could,
Yeah.
maybe at this point in my life, for whatever reason, something is very hard for me. So I won't tolerate this and that, or I can't handle noise, or who knows? There's no rules about boundaries. Could be anything, but it's okay
Right.
to have them and to respect them, because when you're respecting them, you're following yourself, basically, what your body and your mind and your heart needs at that moment, and you're following that and listening to that instead of ignoring it, which will get you into trouble physically and emotionally and in every single way.
100%.
And so
Yeah.
boundaries end up just defining us, right? Their definition. This
Yeah.
is like who I am. They end up forming our individuality. They're not uh, controlling systems. Boundary. They're just, is okay for you in that situation.
Hmm. And so for a woman who knows she needs to have boundaries, but is really wanting to figure out how do I get the courage to erect my boundaries, to hold them tight, what would you say is a first step?
I mean, I'd need to understand which ones are hard to put, what guilt is behind doing that. Often there's a lot of guilt. And I think guilt and shame both are very powerful emotions that
Absolutely.
are,
Mhm.
they're put on us. Those are not really emotions. They're not like sad and angry. Those are ours. But guilt and shame, they kind of come from outside. I see them as not being ours. So guilt has often, been put on in deep ways to many people, like, oh, you should be nice to the grandparent. Yeah, you should do this. You should, whatever. So it's very hard to kind of put aside all the rules that you've been put and just say no.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the main thing to me is that to realize that you're responsible for your well-being. So if
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you don't do it, well, it's on you, and you're going to
Mm.
deal with the consequences of not taking care of yourself. So if you put boundaries, then you will feel better eventually. Maybe not immediately. I could tell you one of the boundaries that I put once, I caused a whole scene at a family gathering by putting a boundary. Everybody was upset at me. Everyone thought, oh my God, she caused such a scene. Not that I was screaming out, but it, ruined the vibe of everybody, everything being supposedly at peace. So, not keeping the peace, basically. But then I realized, the day after, even though at the time it didn't look like I'm keeping the peace and I was crying, everyone's upset and
What
all
was the
that, I
boundary that you
realized,
put?
no, I just told someone to, not speak that way, whatever, but it caused like friction and
Okay.
and disharmony and outer non-peace, right? So
Yeah.
outside there was no peace. I
Hmm.
disturbed the peace
Hmm.
basically, right?
Hmm.
But then what I realized the next morning, it was like, huh, but inside I feel at peace actually.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Inside I'm at peace about this because I did what I feel I should do. So this distinguishing between keeping the peace outside and keeping the peace inside,
Hmm.
for me is very critical. And I feel my job is to keep the peace inside.
Mm.
And when you're keeping the peace inside, then you become a peaceful actor in our world. And so that's what I try to look for, to do things that I feel at peace about. Whatever it is, I feel at peace with what I'm doing. So
Hmm.
I'm sorry everybody doesn't agree,
Hmm.
but that's what makes me
Right.
feel at peace. That takes a lot of courage because you're going to have to stand alone a little bit
Yes.
sometimes. It's hard.
That
It's
in
hard.
and of itself takes courage. And
Yeah.
I think it's so crucial. And for the woman who's like, I don't have the courage to even start that process, I want you to think
Oh,
about the end goal. And
mm,
we have to walk through fear to get to the good stuff, right? And so if when we're feeling really scared and we don't feel like we have any courage, if we can think about and try to project ourselves to the benefit of doing the scary thing, sometimes it can help us garnish enough fear to start to walk through. But I think you have to
yeah,
recognize that fear is not going to be gone, and fear is a big part of courage, right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
have to walk through that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we may have not realized, like I said, we're always looking outside for so
Yeah.
many things. We may not realize we actually have a ton of powerful energy just
Hmm.
inside. We don't even need to go get it. Like
Yeah.
it's there.
Hmm.
And so if you just allow that to rise inside of you, sometimes included in your anger, which again, especially for women, has been very difficult emotion for them to feel. They've been told they shouldn't feel upset, they shouldn't feel angry, but anger is actually a very healthy emotion to get us towards,
It's a great motivator.
enforcing, to
Hmm.
enforcing whatever boundaries we need to do, and accessing this inner power that not only women but all human beings have internally.
Hmm.
Maybe it's been a little suppressed, but
Hmm.
it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. It's there. Go look. You'll see. You got it inside. So, when we start again to feel ourselves, feel our emotions, feel our heart, feel our whatever, and then we
Hmm.
can start to also feel this powerful energy that we all have internally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So, Sandy, thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. Do you have one last word of encouragement for a woman who might notice, I struggle with courage. There are a lot of things I want to do and say and the way that I want to show up in the world, but I struggle with that courage?
I would say the one thing that I never hear anyone say, and that I didn't really get to hear, so I'll say that at least to for somebody's ears to hear, which would be to trust yourself.
Mm,
Trust yourself.
hmm.
Trust
Hmm.
yourself, even if nobody has ever trusted you before.
I love that. That's beautiful. How can people get a hold of you, Sandy?
So the only way to reach me is on my website. I don't really do social media, and it took me a lot of courage to do podcasts, I have to
Ah,
tell you. So
good for you.
yeah, so I have my website. It's called thecouragecircle.com. If you
Mhm.
want to email me, or if you're in Montreal, you want to join our courage circles, it would be a pleasure to have people join. Or if you're interested in my book or anything else, it's all on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, Sandy.
And thank you, Zoe. Sounds like you do great work. So I wish you lots of luck.
Thank you.